The Forgotten Princess. The rain had not stopped for 3 days. It pounded against the thick canopy of trees, creating a rhythmic hum that blended with the distant howls of unseen creatures. Joran pulled his hood tighter, cursing his luck as he trudged through the soaked undergrowth. He had landed on this forsaken world by mistake, his ship forced down by a malfunction in its guidance system. It was supposed to be uninhabited. Yet, as he pushed forward, his foot caught against something soft. A body. His pulse spiked as he crouched down, brushing away the wet leaves that partially covered the figure. It was a woman, her long silver hair clung to her pale skin, her lips slightly parted as if caught in the middle of a sentence. She was breathing, but only barely. Her clothes were torn and covered in mud, but something glinted on her wrist, a thin bracelet with an unfamiliar crest etched into the metal. "Who are you?" Joran murmured, pressing 2 fingers to her throat. Her pulse was weak but steady. She needed help. Without another thought, he lifted her into his arms. She was lighter than he expected, her body limp against his chest. He didn't know who she was or why she was alone in a place like this, but leaving her here meant certain death. He couldn't walk away from that. Shadows of the past. Cien's eyes fluttered open to the dim glow of a crackling fire. Warmth surrounded her, a stark contrast to the numbing cold that had gripped her before unconsciousness claimed her. Her body ached, and her mind felt like a broken mirror, shattered fragments of memory scattered beyond her reach. "You're awake," a voice said. Her gaze snapped toward the man sitting across the fire. His dark brown hair was tousled, his face partially shadowed by the flickering flames. His jacket was damp from the rain, but his expression was calm, observant. "Where am I?" Cien rasped, her throat dry. "A safe place, for now," he replied, handing her a flask. "You were half buried in the mud when I found you. Do you remember how you got there?" Cien took a slow sip of the water, her fingers trembling. Her mind was blank. She squeezed her eyes shut, searching for something, anything, familiar. She could feel the weight of something important lurking just out of reach, but no matter how hard she tried, it wouldn't surface. "I don't know," she admitted. The man, Joran, watched her carefully. "But you do remember your name?" She hesitated. Then, as if from nowhere, a whisper of recognition stirred within her. "Cien," she murmured. The name felt right, even if everything else was uncertain. Joran nodded. "Cien. All right. At least that's a start." He reached into his pocket and pulled out something small and metallic, the bracelet he had found on her wrist. "This was on you," he said, passing it to her. Cien turned it over in her hands. The crest etched into the silver band sent a ripple of unease through her. She didn't know why, but it felt significant. Joran leaned back against the cavern wall. "That symbol, I've seen it before. It belongs to the House of Voron." The name sent a jolt through her, though she couldn't understand why. "What is the House of Voron?" she asked. Joran studied her for a moment before speaking. "One of the ruling families of Kilora, the capital world of the Lithirian Empire." "An empire. A ruling family." Her heart pounded. "So you think I'm," she trailed off, unable to finish the thought. "It's not just a guess," Joran said. "There was a princess of the Voron bloodline who vanished years ago. No one knows what happened to her." Cien's breath caught. Was she that princess? Before she could ask more, a sudden sound echoed through the cave, distant, metallic footsteps. Joran tensed. "We're not alone," he whispered. Fear coiled in Cien's stomach. Whoever was out there, they were looking for someone. And something told her it was her. Hunted by ghosts. The cave's air grew heavy with tension as the distant footsteps grew louder. Joran extinguished the fire with a swift kick of dirt, plunging them into darkness. Cien's pulse pounded in her ears. She barely understood who she was, yet something deep inside warned her, whoever was approaching wasn't friendly. Joran motioned for her to stay silent and crouched near the cave entrance. His body was rigid, every muscle coiled like a predator ready to strike. Cien pressed her back against the damp rock wall, clutching the silver bracelet in her hand. Then she heard it, low, distorted voices speaking in a language she didn't recognize. A cold shiver ran down her spine. Joran turned his head slightly, whispering so quietly she almost missed it. "They're Lithirian enforcers." The words sent a jolt through her. Lithirians. The ruling class of the Empire. If they were searching for her, then Joran was right, she was more than just a lost stranger. She was someone important. Someone dangerous. The voices grew clearer. "Scan the area. She must be close." Cien's breath caught. Joran touched her arm lightly, guiding her deeper into the cave's shadows. "We need to move. Now." They crept through the winding cavern passages, careful not to disturb the loose stones beneath their feet. The enforcers' boots echoed behind them, steady, relentless. At the end of the tunnel, Joran gestured to a small opening, barely wide enough for them to squeeze through. Cien hesitated. Beyond it, she saw only darkness. "Trust me," he whispered. She swallowed hard but followed. They crawled through the tight space, the damp earth pressing against them. When they finally emerged, a blast of cold wind hit her. They were outside. But the momentary relief vanished as a searchlight swept across the rocky cliffs. "There," a voice shouted. Blinding light flooded the area. "Run," Joran barked. They bolted down the rocky incline, jagged stones scraping Cien's palms as she struggled to keep up. The enforcers were fast, their movements precise and calculated. Blaster fire erupted behind them. A shot skimmed past Joran's shoulder, sizzling against the rock face. He cursed under his breath but didn't stop. Cien's lungs burned as they reached the edge of a steep ravine. Her heart pounded, there was no way forward. She turned to Joran, panic rising. "What do we do?" He glanced over his shoulder. The enforcers were closing in, their armor gleaming under the moonlight. Without hesitation, Joran grabbed her hand. "Jump." Before she could protest, he pulled her forward. The world tilted. They plunged into the abyss below. The abyss of memories. The wind howled around them as they plummeted into the darkness below. Cien barely had time to scream before icy water swallowed her whole. The impact knocked the air from her lungs. She thrashed, disoriented, cold fingers of the river dragging her deeper. Panic flared in her chest. Then, strong hands grasped her wrist and pulled her up. Breaking the surface, she gasped, choking on water and air. Joran was beside her, holding onto a jagged rock jutting from the river. "Hold on," he coughed. The current was fierce, but he fought against it, pulling them toward the bank. Cien kicked her legs, struggling to help, though exhaustion weighed her down. After what felt like an eternity, her feet scraped against solid ground. She collapsed onto the wet shore, shivering. Her fingers clenched around the silver bracelet still in her grasp. "We need to keep moving," Joran said between breaths, his own body trembling from the cold. Cien forced herself to sit up. "Why? They won't stop hunting you. We need to get as far away as possible before they send out more patrols." She looked back at the river, still swirling violently. "They won't follow us? Not immediately. They'll assume we drowned. But they'll search once the storm clears." Only now did she notice the sky had darkened, thick clouds rolling in overhead. They stumbled through the trees, their soaked clothes clinging to them like second skins. Each step felt heavier, her mind clouded with exhaustion and something else, something clawing at the edges of her memory. They reached the mouth of a hidden cave nestled between twisted roots. Joran lit a small fire, its warmth barely enough to chase away the cold. Cien sat close, her fingers tracing the delicate engravings on the bracelet. Something about it pulled at her mind, like a melody she couldn't quite remember. "Joran," she murmured. I think I know something." He looked at her sharply. "What is it?" She turned the bracelet over, her pulse quickening. "This symbol, I've seen it before. But not just anywhere. It's a royal insignia." He stiffened. Her breath came faster. "Joran, what if I'm not just some noble? What if I'm Princess Cien?" a voice echoed from the darkness. They both turned. Shadows moved at the cave's entrance. A figure stepped into the firelight, tall, armored, and unmistakably Lithirian. His pale, violet eyes gleamed like ice. "You've been missing for a long time," the stranger said, his voice smooth as silk. "Your empire has been looking for you." Cien's heart stopped. She wasn't just lost. She had been hidden. And now, they had found her. The truth unveiled. The cave's air grew thick with tension. The flickering firelight cast shifting shadows on the stranger's polished armor. His violet eyes remained locked on Cien, unreadable yet piercing. Joran shifted closer to her, his hand inching toward his concealed blade. "Who are you?" he demanded. The stranger smirked, stepping forward. "My name is Valen. And I have been searching for you for a very long time, Princess Cien." The words rang in her ears. Her pulse thundered. Princess Cien. The memory fragments in her mind clicked together like pieces of a long-lost puzzle. Flashes of grandeur, marble halls, a throne room bathed in light, her mother's sorrowful eyes as she whispered, "You must never be found." "I don't remember you," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "No," Valen agreed, "but I remember you. And more importantly, the entire Lithirian Empire remembers you. The lost princess, taken from her rightful place. A kingdom left in chaos." Joran tensed beside her. "She was taken?" "More like hidden," Valen corrected. A desperate attempt to keep her from becoming a pawn in the war, his gaze flicked to the silver bracelet in her hand. "It was the only proof left of your heritage." Cien swallowed hard. "Why are you here now?" she asked. Valen's smirk faded. "Because your time in the shadows is over. Your people need you." "And if she refuses?" Joran growled. Valen sighed. "Do you truly believe the galaxy will let a lost heir live in obscurity? The moment the news spreads, every faction will either want her dead or on their side." His expression darkened. "Your only real choice, princess, is whether you return as a ruler, or as a prisoner." Silence. The fire crackled between them. Cien felt the weight of the moment press on her chest. This wasn't just about her anymore. Her voice faltered. She looked at Joran. His blue eyes held hers, searching. And for the first time, she realized, he was waiting for her decision. Her whole life, she had been running. Hiding from an identity she hadn't even known she had. But now? "I won't be a prisoner," she said, lifting her chin. "If I return, it will be on my own terms." Valen gave a slow nod. "Then let's make sure you return ready." And just like that, her journey had only begun. The return of the lost heir. The journey back to Lithyria was nothing like Cien had imagined. The sleek ship Valen had brought was unlike anything she had ever seen, crafted from dark metal with glowing runes embedded along the walls. As it cut through space, Cien felt the weight of what lay ahead. Joran sat beside her in the co-pilot's chair, his fingers idly drumming against his knee. "You don't have to do this alone," he murmured. She turned to him. "I know," and she did. But facing an empire that believed she was dead? Reclaiming a throne she had never truly known? That was something she would have to face on her own terms. Valen entered the cockpit. "We'll arrive within the hour," he announced. "There's already movement within the capital. Some will celebrate your return, but others." His expression darkened. "Others will see you as a threat." Cien clenched her fists. "Then we'll make sure they understand the truth." Valen chuckled. "Bold. But you're going to need more than courage to survive Letherian politics, princess." Joran shot him a glare. "She's already survived worse." The ship rumbled as they entered Letherian airspace. Cien peered out the window, taking in the breathtaking sight of her homeworld, twin moons glowing over endless spires of silver and gold. Home. And then, the alarms blared. "We've got company," Valen said grimly, pointing to the incoming fleet. Cien took a deep breath. Her fight had only just begun.